Okay, we're in Luke chapter 14. I didn't mention Brother TJ. He had a pacemaker put in. Got a new one. Got a new one. He's a new man. A new pacemaker. Yeah, I guess they have to get him set right or adjusted. Yeah. So we're back in Luke chapter 14. We're going to look at a couple more parables today. Companion parables that again are only found in Luke's account of the gospel. You've probably had something like this happen to you. I know it's because it's happened to me once. Either here at the church building, maybe you're at the gas station getting gas. Somebody pulls up in a vehicle and hops out. Or maybe if you're out at the gas station, they just come walking up. You don't know if you have a vehicle or not. And they say something like this. Well, I'm traveling from Valdosta, Georgia, and I'm trying to get to Ogallala, Nebraska, or Butte, Montana, or something. And because whatever reason, Aunt Susie died, family emergency. I don't have enough money to get for gas, to get for the rest of my trip. Can you give me some money for gas? You ever had that happen to you? That happened to me several times. So I sit there and I scratch my head. And I look at him and I say, I think this for sure, and sometimes I say it. But let me get this straight. You left home with the intention of driving hundreds of miles, maybe 1,000 miles, knowing that you didn't have enough money to get there. Not enough gas. Am I understanding it right? So I've thought about that, and I can only really think of three major conclusions I can draw. Well, you make it think of some. One is, this person's not from South Carolina. They're from Byhalia, Mississippi, or Hickory Hill, or Cordova, or some other such place, and they're just pulling a scam, right? They're just lying to you. It's just another one of those scams that people try to pull on us all the time. And in that case, of course, that's extremely immoral. Try to pull that kind of lie and fraud. Cheat me out of my money. I'm not going to help that. Second possibility is they left knowing they didn't have the means to finish. Knowing they didn't. And this is what I usually say to them. So let me get this straight. You left home knowing that you didn't have enough to get there, and you expected just to stop somewhere along the way and ask a stranger for money. You expect me to fund your trip. That's just as immoral. Well, Aunt Susie died. Aunt Susie's not going to miss you. That's not a good enough reason for me. Stay home. I don't owe you anything. It's not the way this works. Well, the Bible doesn't say that. I'm just supposed to fund your trips. You're not poor. You're not needy. You're not hungry. You just decide to take a trip without enough money for gas and you expect me to give it to you. That's just about as bad as the first scenario. Third possibility might be, like these fellows here in Luke 14, maybe, I don't know, maybe this person didn't know he didn't have enough. Maybe he didn't what? He didn't calculate the cost. Maybe he left, maybe he thought he had it, I don't know. Maybe he's serious and he didn't know he had it. I find that hard to believe, really, under most circumstances, that you just hop in your car and expect to drive across the country not knowing whether you can make it or not. I find that, but I'm going to tell you, I've run into a lot of people that don't have a lot of sense these days. Maybe that's true. Maybe they did. But let's look at Luke chapter 14. And Jesus says, or look at the context of these parables in verse 25. Now great multitudes went with him. What were these multitudes? Why were so many people following Jesus? Give me some reasons. Some of it, yeah. They wanted something like John chapter 6, right? Jesus said, you're just following me for the loaves and the fishes. You're just whatever you can get out of it. You're looking for me to give you a free meal. That's one reason. It could have been, on some part, just, he was working miracles. Maybe they were just curious, fascinated. Maybe some thought his teaching was interesting. A great many Jews were following him because they thought he was the Messiah and was going to do what? Yeah, he was going to drive out the Roman horde and deliver them from their oppressor physically. So there was a lot of reasons that these people were following him and crowding around behind him. But of course, crowding around behind Jesus is not the same thing as discipleship. Just following him in a crowd like these folks. And he knew all this. Remember, the Bible says he knew what was in man. He knew what was in these people's hearts. And so all these people are following him for all kinds of reasons. But here's the thing. Great leaders, the one mark of great leaders, is that they generally state pretty clearly the conditions that are necessary for people to follow. Where they're not deceivers. And Jesus was not a deceiver. He was openly and brutally honest with people about what it would take to be his disciple. So all these people are following him. And notice what it says in verse 25, and he turned. He just turns around and says, we're looking at all these people following him for all these sometimes shallow reasons. If anyone comes to me, and then he throws out this pretty stringent standard. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. Well, that sounds pretty harsh. What does it mean? Whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. So what does that mean, Jesus? What are you saying? He said, well, I'll tell you what I'm saying. Verse 28. For which of you intending to build a tower? Now, more than likely, what kind of tower are we talking about in that culture? Yeah, usually a vineyard, probably. We build towers. Go to Matthew, I'm trying to think of what passage. We studied Matthew 21. We studied that particular parable already months ago. And you would build a tower, you would build a wall around these vineyards to keep the varmints out. But varmints don't, walls may keep varmints out, but they won't keep what? People, thieves. So you would build a tower for a multitude of reasons. You would have a tower there for guarding the vineyard. Also for a place for the workers to find respite from the heat of the day, perhaps even spend the night or whatever. So a lot of reasons for the tower. But this guy's building a tower, perhaps in his vineyard. Which of you intending to build a tower does not sit down first and count the cost? Calculate the cost. What's it going to cost me to build this thing? Whether he has enough to finish it. Lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. It makes me wonder too, is, Jesus growing up in Palestine as the son of a carpenter, he might have even seen this happen more than once. Somebody in the community started to build a tower or some other structure and got halfway through the job and couldn't finish, so people, kind of ridiculed him. Or what king going to make war against another king does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000. That is, and depending upon the time frame, battle strategies change, but do I have the element of, I've only got 10, but do I have the element of surprise? If this was the war between the states, do I have the high ground, which was generally important? Do I think I can outflank these people? What are my advantages even though I've got less troops? And of course, now in our modern warfare, you may not have as many troops, but you might have more firepower, more equipment. So there's a lot of reasons why you might be able to, but you're going to sit down and figure that out, and then, if you don't think you can, while the other's still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. Well, let's go back to verse 26 before we look at the parables a little closer. Let's look at the kind of hatred that Jesus demands. Now, when I read this, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, mother, wife, children, and sisters, he cannot be my disciple. Generally, the explanation we get is what? We know it's not literal. Well, we'll discuss that in a minute, why we know. Yeah, generally, the explanation is, well, hate doesn't mean hate. It means love less. But if we just leave the explanation at that, it kind of tends to dull the edge of the command. There is a paradox here, right? In other places in the New Testament, I'm told to do what? I'm told to do what? Now, I'm supposed to I've got to even love my enemies. Not just my family, not just, my friends. I even have to love my enemies. In fact, the second greatest commandment says, love my neighbor as myself. So, there's a paradox here, and there's a lot of paradoxes in the New Testament. It's one of the interesting things about God's teaching. So, I'm to love on the one hand, and we know from the Bible and the spirit of Jesus' teachings, he's not trying to crush human relationships here. He's not telling us to be hostile or antagonistic toward our families and friends. That's not what he means. Like we said, Matthew 5, we're to love our enemies. Here's some other things we're told to do in the New Testament. Remember Mark chapter 7? What were the Pharisees doing with regard to their parents? They were treating them terribly, right? They weren't fulfilling their responsibilities toward their parents. Jesus said, you're not approved of God. When Jesus was on the cross, what was one of the last things he did? Yeah, made sure his mother was taken care of, right? He said in Matthew 5 in the Sermon on the Mount, if you hate your brother, that's the same thing as what? Murder. That's where it begins, in the heart. Mark chapter 10, little children would come to him, right? He'd gather them up, always accept them. And so the bottom line is, when you look at all the total context of Jesus' teachings and his activities, there's always, we understand that we're to have these warm feelings and feelings of compassion and care for our friends, certainly our family. In fact, Paul said on one occasion, if a man won't take care of his own family, he's worse than what? An infidel, an unbeliever. And so we have these obligations to our family, to our friends, right? And we're to even love our enemies. Now, all these, the different types of words for love are used, but, some people we're going to phileo. Some people we're going to storge. Hopefully with your spouse, you're going to have a little eros. But even with your enemies, you're going to have to agapao. That's a will to do what's in their best interest, to treat them properly. So, what I'm saying is we have to avoid the idea that somehow to obey this command to hate our friends and families, that doesn't mean that we love them less. per se. We're not to diminish any love that we have for people. In fact, you can't love people enough, is the bottom line. Yeah, you can't love people enough. The only person that can love people enough is God, because He has no limitations. We can't fathom the depth of His love, but we can't love people enough. In fact, if I go to Ephesians 5, when we start talking about, well, I'm going to love them less, if I go to Ephesians 5, I'm told as a husband, I'm to love my wife as what? Not as myself, as Christ loved the church. Well, how much love does Christ have for the church? That's how much I'm to love my wife. So I need to be careful that when I read this and I say, well, that means love less. No, wait a minute. Don't diminish any love for anybody. That's not what this means. Well, in order to make sure I keep Christ on top, I better love everybody else a little less. No, that's not the way it works. 1 Peter 1 talks about a sincere love of the brethren and to love one another earnestly. And so we don't love the Lord. The point I'm trying to make is we don't love God more by loving humans less. That's not the way this works. Okay? You can't love Him more by loving people less. But the key, of course, to this verse is where it says yes, and His what? Own life also. That's the key. Right? Because after all, I'm told to love my neighbor as myself. So we know we're not supposed to beat up on ourselves. We're not supposed to hate ourselves. We're supposed to take care of ourselves, have a good, healthy self-image of ourselves. But this talks about I'm to hate my own life. So, what is that? In what sense can I hate myself? There's probably more than one I can think of. And that, of course, is defined as we talk about verse 27, does not bear his cross, come after me. Which is further defined by verse 33, who does not forsake all. So yeah, number one, we're talking about priorities. We're talking about priorities. There are some things I have to deny in order to put Christ first. But what are some things I can hate about myself? What are some things I can hate in other people? Absolutely.
Look at this as used a strong word, hate. It means open, hostile animosity towards something. And I've always taken this passage to mean Jesus is saying, so far as the position of Lord and Savior, there is to be a strong animosity toward anything and everything else that seeks to fill that role.
And I think that's the exact point. There's got to be an extreme or hostile animosity toward anything that would get in the way between me and Christ. And when it comes to myself, do I have some things about myself that can get in the way between me and the Lord?
You're human.
Yeah. I mean, aren't there some base, some greedy, some selfish things about myself that can rob me of life's true values if I'm not careful? That I should have a hostility toward? I mean, frankly, whatever's pure and right and clean in myself or in other people, I should love that. But if I see things that are base and unclean and impure and hostile to Christ, either in my life or in the life of other people, I've got to make a choice. My devotion has to be to Christ. Just that simple. That's where those are the things I have to hate. Somebody says, well, man, it sure puts a damper on on my enthusiasm for discipleship. Well, that was the point. He was trying to put a damper on superficial enthusiasm and superficial discipleship. You want to read a chapter that's kind of a downer, go to Matthew 10. Right? Look over at Matthew 10. When Jesus says, look, you know, I'm an honest person. This is what you need to understand these things. He calls the apostles there at the beginning, and then he sends them out and tells them to go preach to the lost sheep of Israel. Don't take any stuff with you. You know, the ones that are worthy will take you in, but, you know, you're going to run into some people that are not worthy, right? You're going to have some trouble. But you shake off the dust of your feet. Now notice, verse 16, he starts talking about persecutions are coming. I'm sending you out as sheep amongst wolves. And they're going to deliver you up and scourge you. You're going to be brought for governors and kings for my sake, but don't worry. A brother's going to deliver up brother, verse 21. Father's child, children against parents. Look at verse 24. A disciple's not above his teacher. Well, how are they treating you, Jesus, by the way? How are people going to treat you? Well, they're going to treat you the same way. But don't fear those, verse 28, that can kill the body and not the soul. And keep this in mind, no matter what comes your way, you better be able to confess me before men, because if you don't, I'll deny you. Now look at verse 34. I've come to bring division. Right? There's going to be division, even amongst a man's own family. And there, look, he talks about taking up that cross again and following him. Verse 38. So, I mean, this is not the first time that Jesus has laid it out for his followers. That in that particular context, he was talking to his apostles. But here he's just talking to the crowd in general. He says, you know, I don't know what you think you're getting out of this. I don't know what you think your lifestyle is going to be, but this is not going to come easy. And therefore, you've got to count the cost. It's interesting, you know, he's not, and I don't know how this works. But some of you have been in the military. And I kind of suspect that there are some recruiting officers that don't always give you the full picture of military life. Right? You probably go into a recruiting office, and you know, I've seen that commercial on TV. Be all you can be. We're going to make you all you can be. You can get up and do more before 6 o'clock than everybody else does the rest of the day. But they don't show that part where it's about 3 or 4 in the morning, that guy comes in yelling at everybody. Put on your pack, we're going 20 miles, right? So, you know, you have to be careful. Jesus says, I'm not going to paint some, you know, picture for you that whitewashes everything. You know, you need to know what you're getting into. Right. Count the cost. There's going to be some struggle that's going to come your way. And there are going to be some sacrifices you're going to have to make. And so, if I'm going to, look, before a person even begins to follow Christ, there's probably some questions that he needs to ask himself. Number one, based on this passage, he's got to hate his own life also, bear his cross, and then verse 33, forsake all that he has. Am I willing to, number one, am I willing to deny myself? That's probably one of the first questions I need to ask. You've got to ask yourself that question. Because in the end, Christianity is a religion of self-denial, and it is a religion of self-control, by the way.
Say that again, self-what?
Self-control. It is a religion of self-denial and self-control. When I turn on my TV at night and I see people rioting and protesting and out of control, I know they're not living the Christian life. Those people are uncontrolled. They have no self-control. But that's not Christianity. Self-denial is the first condition of discipleship. Matthew 16, if any man come after me, let him deny himself, right? Well, what does it mean to deny myself? What does that mean? I'm no longer doing what?
Bad habits.
Hmm?
Bad habits.
Yeah, but in general, if I'm denying myself, I'm no longer living to do what? Yeah, to please myself. That's right. I'm no longer about pleasing myself. Paul said in Galatians 2:20 what? That he had done what to himself? Yeah, he killed himself. He said, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live. But notice what he said, not I. It's not about me anymore. Not I, but Christ lives in me. Right? He said, I've killed myself. I've crucified myself. Crucified himself to what? To his own, to pleasing himself, to his own desires, to his own fleshly and earthly desires, things that he might otherwise put ahead of Christ. He's killed all that. Put all that behind him. And his life is about pleasing Christ. So, I like what C.S. Lewis says. I won't read the whole quote. But in talking about Christ, he says Christ is saying, I don't want so much of your time and so much of your money and so much of your work. I want what? Yeah, I want you. I don't just want, part of this and part of that. Turn over to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Paul's writing to the Corinthians about their giving. And of course, who's he using as an example of giving? What people? What Christians? Yeah, the Macedonian brethren. And, all right, second, not first. 2 Corinthians 8, he talks about the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia, verse 1, out of the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty, abounded in the riches of their liberality, gave beyond their ability, urged them to take it. Now notice verse 5. And not only as we had hoped, but they first gave what? Themselves to the Lord. Then to us, by the will of God. So, again, the answer to a congregation, and I know Brother Mosier preached on this not too long ago, but if a congregation has trouble giving monetarily, like it ought to be, the answer is not necessarily to pound on this and say, look, you've got to give X percent. Right? The answer is to what? People have got to give themselves first. They have to truly be committed to Christ. Because then it's not a problem. I don't have a problem giving like I ought to. If I've already given him my heart. So, basically, to deny self, we do it every moment of every day, every way. No to self, yes to Jesus. So that's number one. Am I willing to deny myself? Number two, and this is just as important, if I'm going to follow Christ, I have to ask myself, am I willing to abide by his what? I heard it over here. His teachings. Am I willing to do what he says? I mean, that's pretty simple. A lot of people say they are. I'm committed to Christ. And I'll abide by his teachings. What does he say in John 8:31? If you continue in my word, then are you truly my disciples? You say you want to follow me, but are you willing to do what I say? And a lot of people are willing to do what he says for a while until something comes along that what? Doesn't agree with what they want to do. That's just that simple. I've known, and you've known people too. I've known lots of people. If I ask them what God's law on marriage, divorce, and remarriage is, it's simple. One man, one woman for life, till death do us part. Unless one commits fornication, then that person can remarry. The other, the guilty party, knows. Until what happens? Either to their family or to them. And then it goes from, this is God's law of divorce and remarriage, marriage, divorce, and remarriage, to God just wants me to be happy. I don't know how many times I've heard that.
I know it's
God just wants me to be happy. Really? Quote that verse for me.
Greg,
Yeah.
some people make a distinction or try to make a distinction between what they call the teachings of Christ and church doctrine. And if they can get away with it and they make that distinction, say there's a difference, then they can eliminate a whole lot of it, man.
Well, yeah, and the point is, and that's the way the majority of us are, we're fine with the teachings until I'm not fine. Basically. Well, I'm fine with the teachings until they get in my way, until they prevent me from doing something I want to do. And then I'm no longer fine. And then I have to find some way to get around it. And so this is a tough question. It's a tough question. It's a tough thing to say, am I willing to deny myself? It's just as tough to say, am I willing to do what he's asked me to do? Let's go over, there's a passage that every time I read it just kind of haunts me. It's just a fascinating, it's Jeremiah chapter 42 and 43. I mean, it's just, it is such a commentary on the human psyche and condition. I mean, Jeremiah 42 and 43. And if you know the background here, you know, Nebuchadnezzar finally destroyed Jerusalem on his third trip there. This is the third carrying away. And you know, he did it somewhere around 606, 605 BC. He did it about 10 years later, and he did about 10 years after that. And this last time, he leaves pretty much the poorest people of the land, but there are some Jewish military leaders that are still left. They've got some men under them. But several Chaldeans are left in charge. And he leaves a particular fellow in charge as governor. And Gedaliah. And one of the other Jewish military commanders comes in, Ishmael, and he murders Gedaliah, and he murders the Chaldeans that Nebuchadnezzar had left there. And so the people are scared to death because they're saying, well, look, and then he flees to another country. He gets out of there, and they chase him, but he gets away. And so they're sitting there scratching their heads saying, now, when this gets back to Nebuchadnezzar, that his guy who left in charge has been murdered along with some of his guys he left here, he's going to come back here and take it out, even though we didn't do it. And so they've all decided, basically, that what they need to do is flee Palestine and go to Egypt for safety. 42. That's all in 41. That's 41. I'm giving you the background. You don't have to read it right now. You can read it later. You want to read 41, 42, and 43 when you get on. Now, in 43, they go to Jeremiah. Look at, beginning of 42. They go to Jeremiah, God's prophet, and they say to him in verse 2. Captains come to him, people from the least to the greatest, and they say, please let our petition be acceptable to you, and pray for us to the Lord your God for all this remnant, so since we are left but a few, that the Lord may show us the way in which we should walk and the thing we should do. And Jeremiah says, great, I'll do that. I'll pray for you, and whatever God tells me, I'm holding nothing back. I'll tell you what he says. So then, now look at verse 5. So they said to Jeremiah, let the Lord be a true and faithful witness between us if we do not do according to everything which the Lord your God sends us. Whether it's pleasing or displeasing, we will obey the voice of our God to whom we send you, that it may be well with us. Whatever you tell us, whether we like it or not, we're going to do it. These people are lying. I don't know if they're lying to themselves, but they're certainly lying to Jeremiah, and they're lying to God. They said, whatever he tells you, whether it's good or bad, whether we like it or don't like it, we're going to do it. And that's the attitude God wants, right? And that's what they say they have. And Jeremiah says, okay. So 10 days later, God comes to Jeremiah, and Jeremiah calls those people back, and he says, if you'll stay in the land, verse 10, I'm going to take care of you. The king of Babylon's not going to hurt you. I'll show mercy on you. You'll be fine. Do not go to Egypt. I don't want you going back to Egypt. You've already been there. I got you out of there hundreds of years ago, and I don't want you going back, basically always been God's position ever since he got them out of there. But if you say, verse 13, no, we're going to go to Egypt, you look, understand that Nebuchadnezzar is coming to Egypt. And he does later on. In fact, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the city of Tyre and got nothing out of it. And God said in the Old Testament, Nebuchadnezzar didn't get paid for taking out my wrath on Tyre. Therefore, the wages to Nebuchadnezzar and his army for destroying the Phoenicians is, I'm going to give him Egypt. I'm going to send him down to Egypt, let him have them, and he can take all their stuff. That's what he said. And so, he's coming to Egypt, so don't go down there. And if you go down there, verse 16, the sword that you're fearing, it's going to overtake you there. Famine and all that. You're going to die there. Verse 19, the Lord has said concerning you, O remnant of Judah, do not go to Egypt. Now look at verse 20. This is so interesting to me. This is a study of the human condition. For you were hypocrites in your hearts when you sent me to the Lord your God. This is Jeremiah talking, saying, pray for us to the Lord our God, and everything he says we're going to do. I told you this day what he said, and you're not obeying it, you're going to die. What he's saying is, you were dishonest when you told me that. You'd already made up your mind, you were going to Egypt. What you wanted me to do was go to God and ask what you were going to do, and you just thought, or I guess you were hoping that God was going to say, yeah, that's the right move, go to Egypt. Kind of reminds you of Balaam, right? Balaam was hoping God would give him approval when he went back the second time. Now, what did they say? All these leaders in chapter 43. Look at verse 2 and 3. 2. The proud man, I think some versions say the arrogant man. All the proud men spoke, saying to Jeremiah, you speak falsely. Now what did they just say? In the last chapter, verse 5. Whatever you say, good or bad, whatever God says, that's what we'll do. We'll do whatever he said, even if we don't like it. He told them something they didn't want to hear. You're lying. God has not sent you to say, don't go to Egypt. But Baruch, the son of Neriah, he's put this in your mouth because he wants to get us in trouble, wants to get us killed, and therefore, we're not going to obey. I mean, you read that account, and I mean, how many times does that same thing happen in human history? Just everyday people. I mean, that's just a synopsis of the human condition. Yes, God, I'll do whatever you tell me. Good or bad. But I've already decided what I'm going to do. Right? In my mind and my heart. What I really want to do. I'll do what you tell me. Please make sure it's this. Then God says, no, it's not that. Well, that's not God. That's not God. Because God wants me to be happy. And what's going to make me happy is what I want, not what he wants. Am I willing to abide by his teachings? And then, as far as these parables are concerned, am I willing to go all the way? Now, some people start out pretty good. As long as things are going good, that's fine. But, life has a way of getting in the way, right? And life is not a sprint. It's a marathon. And you know what? I've seen people, you've seen people run marathons. They start out pretty good. They may collapse on mile 10. They may collapse on mile 19. Some people make it, what's the marathon, 26.2? Some people make it 26. With 2/10 to go. And don't make it. That's happened before. That kind of reminds me, am I willing to follow him to the end? Reminds me of the parable of the sower, right? A lot of people start out great, like those that were on the rocky, where the ledge, the soil was just over the ledge, and they're all on fire, and everything's great, and then a heat of the day, the sun comes out, persecution arises. What happens? Fall away, right? You know, it's good advice in every facet of life, not just religion, spiritual matters. But we've got to be honest with ourselves, and we've got to count the cost. I mean, I can tell you, when I went to law school, you know, how many people started law school and then within a semester or two said, this is not for me, or the Memphis School of Preaching. You know, if you go to medical school, you better be willing to work long hours for years and years. I mean, there's a lot. If I'm going to be a scholar in some particular area, I'm going to be up late at night, night after night, studying. I mean, there's a lot. The things that are worthwhile that we want, they cost something, right? I guess one of the best examples in our society, you know, when you think about athletics, you know, every kid says he wants to be the next whatever. Great football, basketball, baseball, soccer player, whatever. What does it take to be that? What does it take to be the best in the world at something? What does it take to be Rafael Nadal or Roger Federer? To be the two best players to ever pick up the tennis racket? What did they have to put in? How many hours did they have to put in? I remember when Bjorn Borg played, they said he used to get up and run 10 miles. He'd practice tennis for 6 hours, and then he'd run another 10 miles at the end of the day. That was his day. It costs something if you want to achieve something. Bottom line is, and I'll leave you to this, he's not trying to dampen our enthusiasm, but he also knows that people who don't count the cost, and they start out all on fire, things don't go their way, cold despair sets in, and he's not even saying it's better not to start than to start and fail. He's just saying you need to know there's everything to gain, but there's some cost to it, and you need to be ready. Discipleship is not based on shallow emotion, shallow enthusiasm. Discipleship is based on genuine commitment. And it's something that happens every day, day after day, year after year, until life is over. And if you're not willing to do that, he's not interested in it. You're kind of discipleship. It's not real discipleship. Any questions or comments?
Rick, the illustration he uses about a soldier tries to fight the enemy, doesn't have the resources, he ends up going to a compromise and surrender. We're fighting the greatest enemy there is. If we're not dedicated, we end up compromising.
I mean, usually, unfortunately, it's not so much people on the outside as much as we're on our skin. It's something from within that I desire more than Christ. And I've got to put him first. Okay. Next week, we're going to sing The Wise Man Built His House Upon the Rock. And we'll start class. So that gives you a clue as to